Okay, so as I said last week, the portion Bamidbar last week always is the portion before Shavuot. So then, of course, today, this coming week, we're reading the next portion, Naso. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. This portion happens to be the longest portion of all the Torah portions in the entire Torah, just the way it works out. And chapter 7 happens to be the longest chapter of all the chapters with 89 sentences to it. So I'm not sure how much of the portion we're going to get through today, but it covers some interesting things from completing the description of what the Levitical families are in charge of, to then the treatment of the impure in the camp. And so, you know what, instead of telling you what it's all about, let's just go through these different sections. Okay, so I first wanted to look at, here we go, chapter 5. So if we turn to page 793, chapter 5 of Numbers, so whatever edition of Chumash you're using, the portion Naso, the third Aliyah, the beginning of chapter 5. So let me just read it in Hebrew. Excuse me. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses saying, Tzav et b'nei Yisrael, command the people of Israel, v'shalchu min hamachaneh, they should send out from the camp, kol tzarua v'chol zav, anyone who is afflicted with sara'at, that skin rash that we talked about several weeks ago in the portion Mitzorah, and anyone with an unusual flow from their body, that's what the word zav means, v'chol tamei lanefesh, and anyone who is defiled, it's translated here, anyone who is defiled by a corpse. Good morning, Jan. We're in chapter 5 of the portion Naso, 794 in the Eitz Chaim. Mizachar ad nekeva teshalechu. So it doesn't matter, male or female, you should send them out. El michutz lamachaneh teshalchum. Outside of the camp, you should send them. Velo yitamu et machanehem. And they should not defile or make impure their camp. Asher ani shochein betocham, that I dwell in. So the question is, on the bottom of 793, below the line, for the Midrash, the rabbinic commentary, the expulsion of diseased Israelites is not a hygienic measure. It imagines that many of the Israelites who left Egypt were physically blemished as the result of their hard labor. When they arrived at Mount Sinai, they miraculously were made whole, so that their physical perfection reflected the integrity of their souls. So that's an interesting idea in the rabbinic mind, that there would be a lot of defects, both mental and physical, as a result of years and generations of forced servitude. But the experience of Mount Sinai was such a transformative experience, not just spiritually, but it was a physically transformative one too, making people whole again. Thus, the Torah describes all the Israelites as standing at the foot of the mountain, implying that none was crippled, right? We'd have to look back what we read just on Monday for the Torah reading the first day of Shavuot. The description there, the Ya'amdu, they stood at the foot of the mountain. So for the rabbis, that meant that they stood in a healthy way. Nobody was crippled. Hearing the words of God, implying that no one was deaf. Seeing the thunder and lightning suggested that no one was blind. as they distanced themselves from Sinai, right now that they're starting to prepare to move away, and began to grumble about the hardships of the journey, which they will start doing in next week's portion, the effect of the miracle began to wear off, right? So that they started to be impaired again. Their blemished souls began to be reflected in physically blemished bodies. Note that other sages were sensitive to the danger of identifying physical infirmity with spiritual impurity, which is an interesting idea for the modern mind, that if one is spiritually impure, then one could become physically infirm. And that would be a religiously challenging or provocative statement to say today. So it's just an interesting idea about this concept of how to reconcile the commandments here, that there would be people who would be physically impure. Why would that be if they're at Mount Sinai when they are supposed to be the most pure, the most spiritually perfect? How can you reconcile that? And this suggests that the further you get away from that intense spiritual holy experience, the further you get away from perfection, and how your body could be impaired by that. You know, it's like people today who attempt to go on spiritual missions, whether it's a pilgrimage, like the Muslims who are supposed to go once in a lifetime to Mecca to make the Hajj, that religious pilgrimage. Or there are, within the Catholic tradition, there are pilgrimage routes, like in Spain, or walking the Via Dolorosa on Easter, or on Good Friday, whenever I think it's on Good Friday, to walk the routes and make the stops of the cross, the 12 stops there. These are journeys, whether it's a short one along the Via Dolorosa in the Old City, or longer ones like through the mountains of Spain in one of these pilgrimage routes, or whether it's a Muslim from wherever you are in the world to make pilgrimage to Mecca, or Jews who would make the pilgrimage when the temple was standing to the temple in Jerusalem 3 times a year. That those spiritual journeys are an attempt to cleanse our souls and get us back to this state of perfection. And once you leave Mecca, once you leave Jerusalem, once you leave the old city of Jerusalem and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, then there's some spirituality or holiness that gets left behind. And so, of course, the challenge is how to maintain that level of spirituality as much as possible. And certainly trying to live up to the covenant as described in the Torah, finding moments of spirituality, prayer in our lives, are those attempts to bring spirituality back. The other thing I wanted to say about this, which isn't below the line, is how the idea here of what to do with a person who has a flow that is impure, or the person with the rash. You know, the book of Leviticus already describes for us what to do. So here is a different description. So biblical scholars will point out that what we have in the Torah is a combination of different traditions that were edited, sometimes edited well, sometimes not so well, in putting all these different strands together. I pointed it out yesterday and the day before with the readings for Shavuot, right? So that, especially yesterday with the reading from Deuteronomy, Shavuot is called Chag Shavuot. But in the reading from Numbers for the Maftir portion, from what would have been the second scroll, Shavuot is called Yom HaBikurim. So why is that? Why isn't there a consistent name for the holiday and other holidays, like we saw that for Passover as well? That's Passover is Chag HaMatzot. It's also Chag HaPesach. So why these different names for the holidays in the Torah? So it's the rabbis who had to reconcile all the different traditions into the one tradition that the rabbis created in order to be consistent. And so they would understand the same thing about, well, the book of Leviticus has one description about what to do with a zav and a tsarua, and here in the book of Numbers is something else. There's no mention of bringing a sacrifice here. It's just they go outside the camp. In Leviticus is the sacrifice. So for the rabbis, you need the Leviticus to describe the sacrifice, and you have this to further exemplify what goes on when someone is zav or sarua. Okay, I also wanted to look at, is page 796, the fourth aliyah. So here we have a very, very challenging section. And I want to read this whole section in the Hebrew. So it's chapter 5, verse 11. It's the fourth aliyah, verse 11 through 31. So I want to read this whole thing, and then we'll look at the commentary below the line. So we're on 796 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 5, verse 11, whatever edition of Chumash you have. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the people of Israel, ve'amarta lahem, and say to them, Ish ish, any person. So by saying ish ish, it would be any person, ki tiste ishto, whose wife has gone astray. Uma'ala vo ma'al, and broken faith with him. That's how it's translated here. How did she go astray and break faith? V'shachav ish ota, a man has lain with her, shichvat zera. So it was fully intimate. We'll say it that way. Had carnal relations, as I said here. V'ne'elam me'enei isha, but her husband did not know of it. V'nistara v'hi nitma'a, and she hid it, and she has defiled herself. Ve'ed ein ba, and there's no witness to this infidelity. Vehi lo nitpasa, and she has defiled herself without being forced, and there is no witness against her. The avar alav ruach kina. So the case is a married woman has an affair that is kept secret. So she has defiled herself. It's an adulterous relationship. He doesn't know anything about it. But, verse 14, va'avar alav ruach kin'ah, but somehow a spirit of jealousy passes over him, ve'kinei et ishto, and he is jealous of his wife, vehi nitma'ah, and claims, and that she has defiled herself. Like, if there are no witnesses, she's keeping it secret. How does he know that anything has happened? Somehow he has a sense, perhaps, that she is unfaithful. So if the spirit of jealousy enters into him, and that it's true that she had defiled herself, o avar alav ruach kina, or this fit of jealousy, the spirit of jealousy passes over him, and v'kinei ishto, and is jealous of his wife, v'hi lo nitma'a, and she didn't do anything wrong, and she hasn't defiled herself. Okay, so the case is, if a woman has defiled herself and kept it secret, and the husband chooses and has this fit of jealousy, okay. Or if the husband just has a fit of jealousy and his wife did nothing wrong, what can the husband do? Verse 15, Vehevi ha'ish et ishto el hakohen. The man brings his wife to the Kohen, Vehevi et korbana aleha, and he brings a sacrifice for her. What is the sacrifice? The sacrifice, asirit ha'efa kemach seorim, a tenth of an ephah of barley flour. Lo yitzok alav shemen, don't mix it with oil. Velo yitain alav levona, don't mix it with any frankincense, any kind of herb incense. Ki minchat kenaothu, because it is an offering of jealousy. Minchat zikaron, an offering of remembrance. Maskeret avon, which recalls a wrongdoing. So the husband can bring the wife, whether she has actually done something wrong or not, to a Kohen and brings a tenth of an ephah of barley flour, not mixed with anything else. Okay, so now what does the Kohen do? Vehikriv otah HaKohen, the Kohen offers this sacrifice, this offering, vehe'emidah lifnei Adonai, and stands her up before God. Velakach HaKohen mayim kedoshim. The Kohen takes holy water, bichli cheres, in a clay vessel, umin ha'afar asher yeh bakarka hamishkan, and he takes dirt that is on the floor of the Mishkan. Yikach HaKohen v'natan el hamayim. The Kohen should take that dirt and put it in the water. Okay, so he has a clay vessel filled with holy water, which he puts dirt from the Mishkan into. Ve'hamid HaKohen et ha'isha lifnei Adonai. The Kohen stands the woman before God. Ufara et rosh ha'isha, and she bears the head of the woman. Right? A woman is supposed to have her head covered. The Kohen uncovers her head. Venatan al kapeha et minchat hazikaron, and he puts this in her hands, that tenth of an ephah of barley flour. Uviyad hakohen yihiyu me hamarim hama'ararim. So she has the tenth of an ephah of barley flour in her hands, with her head uncovered, and the Kohen has the clay vessel of holy water with the dirt from the floor of the Mishkan mixed in, and that's called me hamarim hama'ararim, the bitter cursed water. Vehishpia hakohen otah hakohen. The Kohen makes her swear. Va'amar el ha'ishan, says to the woman, Imlo shachav ish otach, if a man hasn't lain with you, ve'imlo satit tum'ah tachat ishech, and you haven't gone astray in defilement while married to your husband, you should be cleansed from these bitter, cursed waters. And you who have gone astray from your husband, and you've become defiled, and if a man other than your husband has had carnal relations with you, v'hishbia hakohen ta'isha, makes the woman swear, b'shvuat ha'alah, with this oath, va'amar hakohen la'isha, the Kohen says to the woman, yitain Adonai otach le'alah v'lishvuah b'toch hamech. May the Lord make you a curse and an imprecation among your people. B'teit Adonai et yerechech nofelet ve'et bitnech sava. As the Lord causes your thigh to sag and your belly to distend. Uva'u hamayim hama'ararim ha'ele b'me'ayich, and these cursed waters should enter your intestines, latzbot beten v'lanpil yarech, causing your belly to distend and your thigh to sag. Ve'amra ha'isha amen, amen. And the woman says, amen, amen. Ve'chatav et ha'alot ha'ela ha'kohen bas sefer. The Kohen writes this curse down on in a scroll, el mei hamarim, and puts it in the bitter water. Vehishka et ha'isha et mei hamarim ha'ararim. He makes the woman drink these bitter cursed waters. Uva'u v'hamayim ha'ararim lemarim. And she drinks them so that it may enter her and bring on bitterness. Velakacha kohen miyad ha'isha et minchat haknaot. The Kohen takes from the hand of the woman this 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour. Vehenif et hamincha lifnei Adonai, and he waves it before God. Vehikriv ota el hamizbeach, and offers it on the altar. Vekamatz hakohen min hamincha et azkarata. The priest shall scoop out of the grain offering a token part of it. Vehiktir hamizbecha, and turn it into smoke on the altar. Ve'achar yashket ha'isha tamayim, and afterwards makes the woman drink the water. Vehishkat tamayim v'hayata, so she drinks the water, and if im nitma'a v'tim ol ma'al be'isha, if she was impure and has gone astray from her husband, uva hamayim hama'ararim lemarim, the water will enter her, v'tzafta bitna v'rafla yerecha, her belly will distend and her thigh will sag, v'hayata ha'isha la'ala b'kervama, and the woman will be a curse among her people. V'im lo nitma'a ha'isha, if the woman hadn't defiled herself, u'tehorahi, and she's pure, v'nikta v'nizra'a zara, she shall be unharmed and shall be able to retain seed. In other words, that if she were to go back to her husband, she will be able to get pregnant. Zot Torat HaKnaot, this is the law of jealousy. Asher tiste isha tachad isha v'nitma'a, for a woman who has gone astray from her husband and become defiled. O ish asher ta'avor alav ruach kina, or a man who has a fit of jealousy go over him, v'kinei ishto, and was jealous of his wife, v'ha'amida ta'isha lifnei Adonai, brings the woman, the wife, before God, v'asala hakohen kol ha'torah hazot, and the Kohen should do for her according to this law. V'nikah ha'ish me'avon, the man will be cleansed of sin, v'ha'isha ha'i tisa et avonah, and the woman shall suffer her guilt. Okay, so this is the Sotah ritual. Clearly, it is sexist. Clearly, it is demeaning, if not, I don't know, a worse insult to a wife that a man could do, highlighting the idea that a husband in any kind of fit of jealousy can force his wife to undergo this embarrassing, humiliating ritual. And so before I read the commentary, any thoughts or comments you have about this? Yes, Jan, unmute yourself. Yeah.
It reminds me kind of like the Salem witch trials.
Yeah. So it reminds us of a lot of trial by ordeal that was common among other religions throughout history. So there were lots of things that just a second, just had a text. I just had to get to it. There are lots of things over the centuries in a variety of religions, mainly in the Christian faith, in which people were put to the test like this. And the one of the aspects of these tests would be that even if you died as a result of the test, if you were innocent, then your soul would achieve its place in heaven. So even though people on earth wouldn't know that, people were subjected, whether it was in Puritan Massachusetts in the 1600s, in Salem, Massachusetts. And I highly recommend going to the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts to see all about it. Whether you were there in the 1600s or in Europe earlier, for a variety of trials by ordeal that would happen like this, it's bizarre stuff. So yes, here the only slight difference is that the result of this trial would be that if the woman is innocent, then it assumes first that the woman is willing to go back to her husband and to resume a relationship with him, right? So it's hard for us as moderns to imagine any wife being willing to subject herself to such a test, right? So why would a marriage in modern age, we would not imagine a successful marriage being one-sided, right? A marriage is supposed to be a mutual relationship built on respect and love of one another. And so when one partner suspects the other partner and even forces that other partner to undergo this bizarre ritual, I would imagine it would have a lasting impact on the marriage, such that it would be impossible or nearly impossible to fix, right? There are marriages that survive infidelity, but most marriages don't. And there are marriages that survive instances of shame like this, but most marriages don't. So yeah, so the one of the glaring things about this is that that there is a test like this that becomes part of the ritual, which goes really against everything we know Judaism to be, which is not magical like this and not based on bizarre bizarre formulas like this. Any other thoughts or comments about this before we look? Yes, Sylvia.
It's just you use the you use the term people or women put to the test.
Yeah.
Is there any place at all where they ask the same question of the male, of the husband?
No, not at all, because the marriage as described in the Torah and through rabbinic times is a one-sided contract. The man buys the wife, and it's not vice versa. And the man agrees in the ketubah to provide for a variety of needs that the wife would have. So women are second-class citizens in Torah society and through rabbinic society. The woman does not have much independence at all. It's very rare that within rabbinic literature that you find places where, or instances when, a woman has some independence on her own. All the time, the woman is either dependent upon her father or her husband for her livelihood and for her sustenance. So a man can do whatever he wants to and with his wife. But the rabbis limit it to some degree. They don't limit this ritual. It's called the sotah, based on the verb ki tisteh. So sin tet he is the root, and so sotah is the word for this ritual. And the other thing about it is adultery. Adultery is defined as with regard to the married woman. So a married man who has a relationship with an unmarried woman, that's not considered adultery. Because technically the married man can marry that unmarried woman, right? A man can have more than one wife. So adultery is only defined as a man having a relationship with a married woman, and that married woman not being his wife. It's somebody else's wife. That's adultery. And that's the punishment for adultery is execution. And if it's a Kohen's wife who commits adultery, she's burned to death. Any other married woman is stoned to death. So it's worse to be a Kohen's wife and commit adultery because you're burned to death than it is to be a regular Israelite woman committing adultery where you're stoned to death. And those deaths are defined by the rabbis. Burned to death means that you have molten wax drip down your throat. That's burned to death. And stoned to death means you're pushed off a cliff into a valley of stones. So it's not throwing stones at a person until that person is beaten to death by all these stones. It's rather being pushed off a cliff and landing on a floor of stones. So yes, that's how the rabbis describe these two of 4 methods of execution. And suffice it to say that the rabbis themselves said that a Sanhedrin who would execute someone committed of a capital offense once in 70 years is a bloody Sanhedrin. So execution didn't happen, but the description of the execution is described in the tractate Sanhedrin. So if you want to read some gory stuff, you can go there. But yes, this portion, this section also highlights the inequality of marriage and what a woman could be subjected to in her relationship and what she's forced to have to do. There's no way that a woman can refuse to go to the Kohen, right? So if a man has this fit of jealousy come over him, whether it's warranted or not, he brings his wife. It doesn't say that the wife can struggle with him, the wife can refuse to go with him. It just says he brings his wife to the Kohen. And the Kohen doesn't serve as a marriage counselor, right? It doesn't say that the Kohen sits the couple down and talks to them. No, it doesn't say that here in the Torah. It just says, okay, we got to, you wonder then how many times this would happen. Is this something that would happen every day in the temple? Would it be once a week? Like, did they have a separate section in the temple set aside for the sotah ritual that would take place? We do know the tradition is, so from the time of Hanukkah, which is 165 BC, for a short period of time, about 100 years, the Jewish community in Israel was autonomous. They had won their freedom from the Greek Empire, and before the Romans came around the year 60 BCE, the Jews were autonomous. So there were kings and queens of Israel during that time. So if you walk the streets of Jerusalem, you'll see some names of these queens, like Shlom Tzion, the queen, is a name of a street near Jaffa Road outside the old city walls. And there's Helena. So there are 1 or 2 of these queens and a couple of these kings from this time period during this Hasmonean dynasty. One of these queens dedicated this plaque. So the wording that is here from verses 21, in verse 21, that's the oath that's supposed to be written down. either Queen Shlomtzion or Queen Helena had it written down on gold to put on a wall in the temple. So here's a woman queen dedicating a plaque in gold in the temple in Jerusalem, highlighting that as a woman, she is recognizing that, and she's the most powerful woman in Israel at that time as Queen of Israel, still dedicates this plaque that highlights the subjugation of married women by their husbands. So it is a bizarre ritual. So let's look below the line and see what the commentary has to say about it. Remember, this is a commentary being written for us, modern Jews, who would be repulsed by reading something like this. Okay? The ordeal of the sotah, so I'm on the bottom of 796. The ordeal of the sotah, the woman suspected of betraying her husband, involves a strange and at first reading demeaning ritual. Now, I would dare say your 20th reading, it's still a demeaning ritual. At one level, it reflects the immense seriousness with which the Torah regards marital infidelity. Okay, yes, marital infidelity is serious, right? It's one of the 10 commandments, right? Right. It's either the eighth or the sixth, the seventh or the eighth commandment, and also don't covet somebody else's wife is a commandment as well. All right. So 2 of the 10 commandments deal with marital fidelity and infidelity, right? So that's clear, and then we know what is the penalty for adultery. So all other transgressions recorded in the Torah can, if committed, be put right. If a man steals, he can return what he stole. If one withholds the wages of a laborer, he can pay him. But one who cohabits with a married woman is unable to restore her marriage to what it was previously. Okay, I would say also if you murder someone, you can't bring that person back to life. So, yeah, so it's not just about marriage that it's something that can't be restored. There are other things that can't be restored either. But there's a sense that the rabbis have that once a married woman is unfaithful, then something about the marriage is changed forever. Rashi connects sotah, literally deviant, right? Gone astray is how it's translated here, to shoteh, fool. Okay, so again, if we look at the Hebrew word in verse 12, the middle of the third line on 796, ki tisteh. So it's the letter sin. The dot is on the left side of the letter. For on the right side of the letter, it'd be a shin, right? So shin tet he would be shoteh, a fool. Sin tet he is going astray. So grammarians would suggest that there could be a relationship between the two words, the letter shin and the letter sin, being close enough because remember when Hebrew is written without vowels, it looks like the same letter. So you have to know from context how the word is supposed to be pronounced. Okay, so you could read it as ish ki tishte ishto, whose wife has become foolish, as opposed to whose wife has gone astray. All right, so it's not a far reach to just move the dot to the other side or pronounce it that way, because again, Hebrew is not normally written with vowels. So Rashi connects sotah, deviant, to shoteh, fool, reflecting the Talmudic dictum that no one sins unless overcome by foolishness. All right, so page 3a of sotah kind of provides the background to all of, in the Talmud and in the Mishnah, provides all the background to this and what would be the circumstances in which this would be brought to the temple as part of the ritual. So that they're giving their opinion that people are foolish when they are unfaithful to their spouse. If we could clearly see the consequences of what we are tempted to do, we would never sin, right? So sometimes we get caught up in the heat of the moment without being able to see clearly what we're about to do. People sin not out of calculation, but in a spirit of folly, losing control of their reasoning faculty. Yeah, that is a layer. That is assuming that people are nice people to begin with. Then yes, nice people can sin by a spirit of folly coming over them, as opposed to other people who are not nice by nature. And then, they normally do not nice things. So it depends on the kind of person you are and your personality to determine what the kind of sin you are committing and the level of sin that you're willing to go. The Talmud tells us that the ordeal of the Sotah worked only in an age when people believed in its power to expose the guilty and exonerate the innocent. In the more cynical period of the Second Temple, it had to be discontinued. In other words, what that means is there was such a level of marital infidelity that it just was no good to do this anymore. We'd have to look at the Talmud, at the Mishnah there and the Talmud about this for a discussion of why this ritual went into disuse, and the comment that the rabbis say that made on Jewish society at the time. But there's nothing in rabbinic literature that questions at all the place of the woman and how dare the husband do this to the wife. And nobody's suggesting that the wife can bring the husband for a similar kind of procedure if the wife has a fit of jealousy that passes over her about her husband's behavior. No one in rabbinic times through the Middle Ages has any comment like that. And so we're left to modern times to have comments about this and to be confounded by this bizarre ritual. Okay, so that's enough said about Sotah. What I'd like to conclude with is looking at the end of chapter 6. In just a few minutes that we have left, I just want to point out that this one of the most famous prayers and blessings in all of Jewish tradition is found here in this week's Torah portion. Okay, so this is, I'm on page 804, chapter 6, verse 22. It's the end of the fourth Aliyah. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el Aharon ve'el banav lemor. Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Ko tevarachu et bnei Yisrael amor lahem. This is how you should bless the people of Israel. Say to them the following: Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. I like to translate it as, may God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you. That's the line that we have here. Let me show it to you. This is the line that's, come on. Oh, I can't do it. I can't show you my virtual background because I'm in my office at shul and I don't have a green screen behind me. So I can't change my background to show you the bima and this line that we have in sculpted letters above that half moon window that's above the ark. So we have that line is from here. And then the third line, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bestow his favor. Actually, literally, may God lift his countenance upon you and grant you peace. V'samu, verse 27, V'samu et shemi al bnei Yisrael. Thus shall they link my name with the people of Israel. Va'ani avarachem. And I will bless them. Right? So this beautiful prayer, the commentary points out the 3 lines of the prayer. It's 3 words in the first line, 5 words in the second line, 7 words in the 3rd line. God's name is the 2nd word of each line. So 3, 5, 7. I think there are also 60 letters altogether in the in this prayer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, 60 letters. So 60 is an important number in the Bible. So that's like a sense of fullness and wholeness in the Bible. So 3, 5, 7, that kind of pattern. So it's important poetically for it to be. So it's not just the prayer with beautiful words and beautiful content, but also the structure of the prayer adds to the beauty of the prayer. So it's a unit in and of itself. The fact that it's 3, 5, 7 and 60 letters altogether highlights that this prayer is, just as we ask for wholeness, peace, shalom, there being understood as wholeness, completion, the structure of the prayer highlights that sense of completion and wholeness too. So it's also a beautiful idea that as the Kohanim are busy doing rituals that only Kohanim are allowed to do every single day, offering the sacrifices, thinking that the rituals are only for them to do, for the Kohanim, and therefore they have the access to God and nobody else does. The fact that they have to bless the people of Israel highlights that everybody is supposed to be part of the ritual, the worship service, and that everyone has access to God's presence. And by having the Kohanim do this prayer on behalf of the people, for the people, highlights then how everyone in the community can have a sense of God's presence in their lives. So it's really a very beautiful prayer. And so there, so I think, there's also a section here, it's 1148. There's also a section here about the Nazarite vow, which we don't have time to get into. And then the rest of the portion, all of chapter 7, is about the dedication of the tabernacle itself and the gifts that each of the tribes brought for the dedication. It's the exact same gifts that each tribe brought. And there's a lovely idea of why then does the Torah waste the space? It could have just said, each and every one of the tribes brought this gift every day for 12 days, and then explain what the gift is. So just have it as one paragraph, as opposed to 12 separate paragraphs repeating the same thing over and over again. So just as a behind the scenes kind of thing for a Torah reader, it looks like there's a lot to read here in this Aliyah, but the trick is it has the exact same cantillation marks for each and every one of these paragraphs. So you just have to learn the cantillation mark for one paragraph, and then you basically are able to do 12 paragraphs in a row pretty easily. But still, the question is, why should the Torah waste space? And it just highlights that every person's gift, even if it's the same as somebody else's gift, is important and should be highlighted. That it's not good enough to say ditto, or I agree with so and so. It's better to highlight each and every person's gift. Each and every person is singular, unique, and their gift is seen as a highlight and special gift to God. Okay, so that's this week's portion. Naso, any other questions or comments? So then I'll wish everybody a good week. We'll see you all next Wednesday for Torah study next week. And I hope everybody has a good day.
Yasher koach, Yonah.